Sir Hadrian Marlowe, one of the esteemed Victorian knights of Emperor William the 23rd, stands in the vast and mighty halls of Forum. A humble soldier is testifying before the Emperor of the Solar Throne, an unusual occasion that may have only happened 100 times in the Empire's history. The soldier recounts the disturbing tale of the Battle of Hermanassa, where the Syelsens scored a devastating victory. Hadrian listens as a pale king is described to have wiped out the legionnaires there, a shadowy figure who has grown of considerable repute in the war against the Syelsen. Syriani Dorayaica, the scourge of earth. I had no reason to believe it was the creature from my visions, and yet I knew. Hadrian knows that Dorayaica is the Syelsen king he has seen in his apocalyptic visions, the one leading vast armies across the stars and wearing a silver crown. The emergence of Dorayaica marks a concerning turning point in the war as well, for under its leadership the Syelsen strategy seems to have become more dangerous. No longer do they simply raid cities and colonies to use their populations as food, but are now beginning to strike key military targets such as the shipyards at Hermanassa. With this new level of organization and the true extent of their numbers unknown, the Syelsen now pose a more dangerous threat than ever. The testimony ends, and a soldier named Carax finds his way to Hadrian and Paulino. Hadrian has been able to retain Paulino and his friends from Red Company as part of his retainer. Their classes have been elevated, and they are now members of Hadrian's house. Paulino has also essentially been given a second life, with his body transformed and the aging process rewound. Presently, Carax approaches Hadrian, appearing almost cowed by the legend of the Victorian knight standing before him. The Red Company has gained considerable repute for their heroics at Aptuca, where Hadrian defeated the Syelsen prince Ulurani in single combat. The Syelsen had then fled after their ship was wired with explosives for ransom, and Aptuca was saved without a single shot fired. Consequently, Hadrian has become a cult hero of sorts in the military, and Carax even gets to one knee and asks Hadrian to bless him. This lonely soldier worshipped me, and I had no power to bestow blessings, and no hope to give. There were tears in the soldier's eyes when he stood. They say it's hopeless, master, the war. And I clapped the man on the shoulder and sent him on his way. He looked back the whole while, bumping into court logothetes and women dressed in bright gowns, until at last he was lost in the throng of people and swallowed up. I never saw him again. Hadrian is then escorted by the Knights Executor, the security of the palace, through the Eternal City to the imperial apartments. There he visits the Perenine Palace for his second audience with the Emperor, the first being when he was inducted into the Royal Victorian Knights. Hadrian has friendly relations with Emperor William, and being Palatine is also distant cousins with the ruler of the Solon Empire. He is briefed on recent developments on Gododin, a relatively unassuming world. It serves as a primary legion base between the Sagittarius and Centaurus arms of the galaxy, and Emperor William reveals that recently a legion dispatched for the Romanu province has gone missing. Hadrian is assigned to find the missing legion, which he knows has several underlying political implications. For though he knows he is loyal to the Empire, there are others in Forum who are wary of his sudden rise and closeness with William. Finding the legion in the vastness of space will take years and be nearly impossible, and it seems to Hadrian he is being set up for failure and to return to Forum humbled. He knows the Emperor must be well aware of this, but William reveals little else. Instead, he then asks for Hadrian to take his son Alexander to Gododin, to tutor him as a squire. In no position to question the will of the Emperor, Hadrian agrees to the mission. He then asks for access to the Imperial Library on Colchis, where he secretly hopes to search for ancient knowledge that may provide clues to his miraculous return from death on the ship Demiurge. Hadrian cannot admit to the existence of the Quiet in front of the Emperor, for it would be equivalent to heresy. He then heads to another meeting with Imperial officials for a formal briefing on Gododin. Accompanied by his captain Octavia Corvo, Hadrian learns that there is precious little intel to act on, something his political rivals seem to relish. Sir Lorcan Brethnac and Lord Augustine Bourbon, the Minister of War, distrust Hadrian as he gazes at the map tracking the Lost Legion. It had been heading for Nemavan, and will take countless years to track down. Hadrian has no doubt either Lorcan or Augustine, or both, had suggested the mission to the Emperor to quietly remove Hadrian from the imperial court. A young officer named Friedrich Oberlin reveals that other legions have been lost in the region over the past century. He believes they are being attacked somewhere between Gododin and Dion Station, which is at least something to act on. Hadrian leaves the meeting, knowing he is fully expected to fail. He walks with Octavia and Polino back to the flagship of Red Company, the powerful Tamerlane capable of housing 80,000 troops, and becomes determined to discover who is scheming against him. Several days later, Hadrian travels back to the imperial apartments to pick up Alexander, one of the emperor's many children. To his surprise, Empress Maria Agrippina is there, an image of timeless beauty and strength. She coldly welcomes Hadrian, casually remarking how he keeps the company of homunculi and degenerates like Valka, his Tavrosi lover. Maria almost seems to mock Hadrian and his rapid ascension before Alexander appears. He is only 30 standard years old, and bears a close physical resemblance to the other heirs of the empire. Alexander's sister Selene Event also enters, who Hadrian immediately recognizes. For long ago, in his visions on Vorgassos, he had seen her seated at his feet, himself upon the solar throne. But his attention then returns to Alexander, who is the 107th child of William and seemingly confined to serving as a glorified backup to the throne. He will not be allowed to marry or have children, and will thus be driven, innately, to make a name for himself in some way. Hadrian shows him to the Tamerlane, where he meets the crew and Hadrian's closest friends. It is a culture shock for the young prince, who must become accustomed to losing his royal privileges and adapt to the life of a common soldier. Alexander initially chafes at orders to bunk with the junior officers of the ship, but reluctantly agrees. Krim and Siran are quietly amused, as well as Lorian Aristides. Lorian is a calm, calculating man half Hadrian's age, and is also an intis. His Palatine father and mother had had a child without the consent of the Imperial High College, and as a result Lorian was born deformed. He is less than 5 feet tall, with a useless leg and prone to bouts of paralysis in his other limbs. Normally, he would be exiled from any other noble court, but owing to his razor-sharp mind and quicker tongue, he had found his way into Hadrian's service. Hadrian and his officers hope the prince will be humbled and grow as a man during his time with Red Company as they sail for Gododin. He retires to his quarters, where Valka awaits him. They have remained together all this time, but have not married. Such traditions do not exist in Tavrosi culture, and Hadrian is content with loving her as she is. The Tamerlane arrives at Gododin and is greeted by the Knight Castellan. The planet itself is a massive agricultural hub and a critical supplier of food for the legions. Hadrian leads Red Company to Fort Dean, where they learn the volume of space they must search is dauntingly huge. Hadrian and his officers come to suspect the attacks on the missing legions may be at the hands of the extrasolarians, not the Cielsen. He exchanges a glance with Tor Varo, knowing the Scholias fears the same as him. 4 years ago, on a mission to Are, Red Company had discovered evidence of an alliance between a Cielsen Scienda and the Extrasolarians, one of frightening military potential. They reveal nothing, however, and learn that it will be 2 months for the outriding scouts to return and several more years to probe the space of interest. Hadrian decides to have Red Company wait for the scouts to return before they set out on the mission. Alexander proposes they send out a second convoy to serve as bait to draw the attackers out. It is good intuition, indicative of the marginal growth of character in the prince, though he is still growing accustomed to the diverse array of humans under Hadrian's command. Red Company settles into a waiting period, during which Hadrian learns there is a company of Archtani auxiliaries stationed near the fort, a contingent of bird-like warriors capable of flight. He becomes acquainted with them, and is able to pacify a defiant warrior named Udax who attacks him and Polino. Hadrian learns Udax was hired to assassinate him, and the warrior reveals he believes his contact had been one of the Chantry. Hadrian spares Udax's life, believing the attempt to be too clumsy to be orchestrated by the powerful institution. Hadrian then decides the company will depart shortly, enlisting several ships from Fort Dean as well as the Archtani soldiers, which include Udax and their leader Barda. The Tamerlane departs Gododin on a course for Nemavand, accompanied by 4 smaller legion ships. On the flight, Hadrian tells Alexander of the Extrasolarians of Are, who had been contacted by the Cielsen and referred to themselves as Minos. As the Tamerlane cruises through space at warp, Alexander's training continues. He still looks down on Lorien and Ilex, and Intis and Homunculus respectively, and is frustrating slow in his weapons training. Over time, much of the crew enters fugue, but Hadrian opts to stay awake during the entire journey spanning years. The Tamerlane arrives at the designated location to learn the scouts have discovered no leads on the missing legions. Hadrian holds a holographic meeting with the captains of the other ships to discuss whether to assist the scouts in their search or continue to Nemavand. A middle ground is reached where they will move at slow warp to Nemavand, remaining in the space of interest while hoping to bait the mysterious attackers into conflict. After some time, the ploy works and the Tamerlane is attacked. Hadrian rushes to the bridge, letting the more experienced naval commanders take charge. Octavia and Lorien assess the threat, which is soon revealed to be a massive Cielsan world ship. Cielsan attack craft swarm towards the Tamerlane, looking to board. The other Legion ships are also being harried, and Hadrian then decides that to find the lost legions, they must fly towards the world ship into the oncoming horde. Lorien has them wait until the last possible moment to accelerate, causing the Cielsan to overshoot the ship and fall prey to the Legion Aquilari. They learn the Legion ship Mintaka has been harpooned and is being dragged towards the world ship, with the Androzani battling Cielsan borders already. Hadrian takes action, readying a cohort and the Urchtani to take the fight back to the Cielsan. Hadrian decides to lead the boarding party on the world ship himself and seals Valka in their quarters. A force of 2,000 soldiers is launched on mini shuttles, on a direct course for the massive world ship. They break through the hull, scattered across the surface. Hadrian leads his squad past irregular, non-uniform walls, keeping in contact with the other officers on the mission and Valka back on the Tamerlane. He begins searching for the missing legions, but comms soon come in of contact with the enemy. The Cielsan begin attacking Hadrian's men from the walls, and he barely gets his own squad into a defensive formation in time. The walls on either side of them open, and waves of Nahute attack the legionnaires. And down both ends of the hall, Cielsan war cries begin to be heard. Tall, powerful alien warriors wearing painted masks born from the nightmares of man attack Hadrian's squad, who barely manage to hold the line. The superior weapons technology of the legions gives them an advantage, however, and they look to link up with the other units. The Urchtani, led by Udax, then arrive and help wipe out the rest of the attackers. Hadrian leads his unit further into the ship, encountering a textile factory of sorts. They also discover an abandoned room, where Hadrian finds a communal dining table. On top is a dead legionnaire with missing limbs, belonging to one of the missing legions. It is a cold indicator of the fate of the rest. Again, Hadrian is reminded of his naivety in the past, forever believing peace was possible. They close in on the massive central hold, bracing for a second wave of attackers to arrive at any moment. Hadrian leads them through a small airlock, but the metallic clangs begin to ring through the quiet. At the end of a hall, two long white arms then seize two soldiers and tear them to pieces. It is something in the ceiling itself, and Hadrian hears more scuttling as a massive white shape falls from above. The rest of the men are frantically rushed through the airlock, and Hadrian now knows they are all in mortal danger. For the creature he saw that tore through his men is one of the demons of Are, the union of Cielsan with extrasolarian technology. Cade, one of Polino's centurions, is able to locate the ship's fuel reserves as Hadrian's unit comes across a great chasm in the hold. They find the Legion ship Merciless, broken open and scuttled. Hadrian finds the few crashes of the ship that held some 9,000 men destroyed, with the half-eaten corpses littering the floor. Ominously, all their heads are also missing. Additionally, hundreds of soldiers are still alive in fugue, being held as the next meal of the Cielsan. Then, Hadrian is shown a gruesome monument, a pile of severed human heads and bones, with thin strips of cloth fluttering about like prayer cards. A furious Hadrian then plans to lead the Cielsan into an ambush using the ship's guns, while reinforcements are sent to an outnumbered Cade. His men manage to fire up one of the Merciless's guns and fire it deep into the hold. They wait for the Cielsan attack to arrive, also knowing the monstrous chimera still lurks somewhere in the dark. Then, a faint white host numbering hundreds is spotted in the distance. The guns open fire again, but with limited ammo, Hadrian knows it is only a matter of time before they must fight hand to hand. The Cielsan seem to be surprisingly resilient against the high-powered rounds, raising concerns that they are shielded with extra Solarian technology as well. The swarm of Cielsen continues on, pressing their significant advantage in numbers. Cade patches in, informing Hadrian his men may be able to vent the fuel reservoirs, but the Chimera has been spotted in their location. With Valka's counsel, Hadrian realizes the only way to victory is for Cade to blow the fuel tank to force the tanks to vent. It will condemn the brave centurion to death, who asked to be avenged before cutting the line. As Imperial cohorts rush towards the Merciless, Hadrian finds that his comms have gone offline. A cold voice then patches in, speaking Cielsen. It is not Prince Dorayaica, and then on one of the Urchtani scout cameras a monstrous head looms into view. It is the Chimera, a Cielsen Exalted. The Exalted reveals it is a Vayadan, one of 6 holy slaves of Dorayaica's Ieder Yamani, his white hand. The Chimera is called Ubalu, and claims it is coming for Hadrian. At this, it crushed the camera, the helmet, and the head of the Urchtani within it in its massive metal hand. And above I heard, like distant drums, the sound of metal feet on the hole above us. His heart tight, Hadrian gives Polino command of the bridge and prepares to battle Ubalu himself, not knowing what hidden weapons lay in possession of the Chimera. He summons Syrian to his side, and they march out as Ubalu wreaks havoc outside the ship, its voice singing in their compromised comms. It speaks Galstani to be understood by the men, and fear begins to spread through the ranks. Hadrian searches for Ubalu as Udax is ordered to join him and Syrian. Stalling for time, he banters with the Chimera, who reveals the princes Aranata and Ulurani had been rivals of Dorayaica. For Dorayaica is called the Shiomu, the prophet, and seeks to become Eta Be Etan, the prince of princes. If it is able to unite all the Cielsen clans under one banner of war, they may prove to be too much for the Empire to defeat. Still, Ubalu remains out of sight, but then out of a grate a white blur crashes down on Hadrian's men. Ubalu moves with blinding speed, heavily armored, and breaks through Hadrian's hoplites with ease. It strikes with a sword so fast that shields, designed for high-velocity projectiles, are able to block its blows. Hadrian manages to cut the sword off its mechanical arm, but it seems unbothered before vanishing abruptly. Hadrian, Syrian, and the surviving men flee as Ubalu reappears with a thunderclap, knowing that Vayadan wants to capture Hadrian alive to bring back to Dorayaica. Valka informs Hadrian the world ship has started venting. Cade's sacrifice is success. Udax is still looking to link up with Hadrian, the drum of metal claws looming behind him. Hadrian and Syrian barely make it to safety just as Ubalu catches up to them. It lunges at them, but in the tight space of the tunnel it stumbles and falls short. Hadrian turns and cuts off its shoulder turret, but is winded by a stray blow that makes him hit the ceiling. He is dragged to safety as the soldiers behind him open fire and hurl grenades at Ubalu. However, the Chimera fights on, unleashing a chilling shriek as it crawls through the door. However, its shields are now down, and Hadrian lunges forward and manages to sever one of its 4 arms. Ubalu leaps over them, landing on several fugue creches, but then Udax arrives in time and opens fire with his plasma rifle. Ubalu is consumed in flame, but lashes out and fires a white javelin. It kills one of Udax's companions, and Ubalu rises to its feet, its skeleton glowing red from its overheated joints. The hobbled Chimera attacks Hadrian again, still a formidable foe. Blows rain down on the commander of Red Company, who can only hope to deflect their formidable power. However, he is struck in the arm and picked up off the floor. Syrian and the others open fire, and Hadrian is thrown away. Ubalu begins destroying the nearby creches and their inhabitants, and Hadrian rises and charges again. He manages to cut off one of its legs, crippling it. Ubalu refuses to surrender, and instead seems to deactivate entirely. But before it fully dies, it utters chilling words to Hadrian. He has seen it, Hurati. He has seen your death. Reports come in of the battles elsewhere, with the Mintaka being freed and the Cielsen routed in other areas of the world ship. Hadrian, however, is troubled by Ubalu's last words, worrying that Dorayaica has been blessed with visions similar to his own. The corpse of Ubalu is taken back on board to the Tamerlane, and they return to Forum. It is a momentous occasion, the triumph of the Devil of Medua. Red Company is paraded in front of millions, the sounds of trumpets and marching Imperial Martians ringing in the skies. And the thunder of their march in time to the music of horn and timpani was enough to shake old Jupiter from his forgotten sleep on lost Olympus and proclaim our message across the stars. We are the gods now. Behind Hadrian's Red Company comes their Cielcen prisoners, 5 crucified officers and 3,000 warriors with their horns cut off. Hadrian himself rides last with his closest officers. On this one occasion, I wore no black and was arrayed in imperial argent, the brightest white which is reserved only for members of the blood imperial, for I was a cousin of that blood, and they claimed me in triumph, so that I seemed to gleam like a white star in my formal armor before that empty throne. No slave stood at my ear, no homunculus to whisper that I too was mortal. It is a great victory for Hadrian, who has defied all odds and now wields the broken staff of Eubalu as an unmatched trophy. The parade reaches the last stair, where Hadrian ascends surrounded by the banners of noble houses. Among those to not bow are Augustine Bourbon or Marius Hohenzollern, and Hadrian eventually reaches the emperor on the final stair. He kneels before William the 23rd, who then presents the grass crown, a crown of living leaves and wood laced with gold. It is the highest honor possible, and Hadrian turns back to the roar of the crowd, the gazes of his men and friends. But even in his moment of glory, his vision haunts him, the threat of Dorayaica looming in the future. That evening, Red Company attends a banquet of celebration, where Hadrian is greeted by Prince Alexander. The enthusiastic heir introduces him to his brothers Philip and Ricard, the 52nd and 47th heirs who seem to be more interested in partying than politics. After escaping the princes, Hadrian and Valka talk quietly on the floor. They are then interrupted by a palace eunuch, for the Princess Selene has asked Hadrian for a dance. He is shown to an upper platform, where the beautiful princess is delighted to see him. She thanks him for taking on Alexander, and Hadrian begins to wonder if she is attempting to court him. After the dance, he finds Valka sitting out in the gardens. Feeling at last free from prying ears and eyes, he talks candidly with Valka, apologizing for keeping her out of the battle in the world ship and reaffirming his love for her. However, Hadrian then confesses he detests having Alexander around, citing his arrogance. There is a flash of motion, and he turns to see a figure retreating into the palace. In his heart, he knows it was Alexander, and that irreparable damage has been done. After the ball, Hadrian retreats to the Tamerlane, where he awaits further orders from the imperial house. In the meantime, he returns to his political joust with Brethnac and Augustine Bourbon. 2 long months pass before Hadrian is finally called back to the palace. It is a private audience with Emperor William, who tells him of a new chieftain emerging in the Extrasolarians named Calen Herendotes. The talk shifts to Dorayaica, and Hadrian confesses he believes the self-proclaimed prophet to be the Cielcen king he was shown on Vorgassos by the Mericani daemon, keeping his visions of the quiet a secret still. The news draws a sigh from the mighty emperor. No one man was meant to rule so vast an empire, and that old William bore that weight so nobly and with no complaint was a credit to him. Always he seemed to me the picture of the philosopher king, like old Winston the Good, like Raphael, like Marcus Aurelius, tired, world-weary, and wise. William then gestures for Hadrian to take a seat, and tells him this conversation is to be considered off the record. The emperor reveals that he has indeed been counseled to consider Hadrian a threat, but assures him he does not agree with the assessment. He also knows of Hadrian's insult to Alexander, but has chosen to overlook it. Stunningly, William then reveals he wishes Hadrian to marry the Princess Selene. Hadrian is trapped, feeling one of his visions is beginning to manifest. He knows he has no choice but to agree, well aware this will only increase the venomous ire of his political enemies. Hadrian returns to Valka, who seems unbothered by the news. As she and Hadrian are not married and never will be due to Chavrosi cultural standards, she has no issue with the proposal. Hadrian is troubled nonetheless, not wanting to be pulled deeper into the imperial political games. Time passes, and Hadrian begins spending more time with Selene, who shows him a relic of ancient Earth while riding on horseback. Returning back, Kryn rushes up to Hadrian, telling him there was an assassination attempt in his chambers. Valka has been injured by a knife missile, and it is unknown how the weapon was snuck on board the ship. Houses Hohenzollern, Mahidol, and Bourbon all rise immediately to the top list of suspects, being the only banners not lowered at Hadrian's triumph. Hadrian believes they must also consider Alexander was involved as well. Speaking more with a recovering Valka, however, Hadrian has a moment of clarity and comes to suspect the Chantry. He stays on the Tamerlane for a week as Krim and Lorien begin investigating the assassination attempt. Hadrian attends a council meeting and apprises them of the recent events, detesting the game of cat and mouse he is now trapped in. However, Lord Bourbon and Synarch Vergilian of the Chantry initiate an inquisition in the Tamerlane, citing it as a safety precaution to root out demonic contamination. The ship is locked down, and Hadrian warns Octavia there is a chance evidence is planted to incriminate them. As a precaution, Valka is put in fugue, and Hadrian hides a recording of his death. Lorien takes charge of the investigation as the Grand Inquisitor arrives. Hadrian is confined to his quarters, powerless to do anything but wait for results from Krim and Lorien. One day, Sir Friedrich Oberlin visits Hadrian, accompanied by an inquisitor for Hadrian's personal questioning. He passes the test with ease, and then Oberlin also departs but leaves a secret paper note for Hadrian. He is revealed to be a believer in Hadrian, and confides the knife missile was arranged by Director Brethnac with the help of priests. Additionally, one of Hadrian's lieutenants is responsible for sneaking the weapon on board. Days later, Lorien manages to sneak into Hadrian's quarters and is apprised of the traitor. He recognizes the name written by Friedrich, and is asked by Hadrian to break her out of a Chantry ship so she can testify against Brethnac. After Lorien leaves, Hadrian is again forced to wait for news from his friends over a period of agonizing days. However, after 10 days, a battered Lorien returns and reports total success. The lieutenant was somehow freed and fully confessed, leading to Brethnac's arrest. There is nothing, however, that implicates Lord Bourbon. More months pass, with Lorien making a full recovery. At last, Hadrian is again summoned before the Imperial Council. There, he learns he may soon take the council seat of Lord Cassian Powers, a former war hero of Cresgard. Hadrian declines, stating that as a Victorian knight he is only subject to the will of the Emperor. He also refuses to allow his officers to be investigated by the Chantry as to how the lieutenant was freed, effectively pitting the power of the institution against the will of the Emperor. Princess Celine also visits the Tamerlane, as well as Alexander. He coldly greets Hadrian in an arrogant manner, but after a tense standoff accepts his apologies and requests of forgiveness. Celine then invites him to an event at the Colosso, hosted by the first heir Aurelian. There, Hadrian meets the Crown Prince, who is nearly as old as William and likely to never sit on the throne, as successors are handpicked. Hadrian also meets Celine's younger sisters Titania and Vivian, and it turns out Empress Maria is also there. She openly expresses distrust of Hadrian's ambitions, eyeing his relationship with Celine warily. In a blatant insult, she commands Hadrian to crawl forwards and kiss her foot, something normally reserved for slaves and lowborns. However, he is saved at the last moment by none other than Alexander, who surprisingly asks to accompany Hadrian the next time he leaves for him. As the fights below commence, Princes Philip and Ricard arrive at the suite and provoke Hadrian into nearly striking Ricard by insulting Valka. Empress Maria arrives, her hatred of Hadrian not disguised at all. She calls Valka an animal, and for threatening Prince Ricard she orders him to fight in the Colosso. Hadrian returns to the Tamerlane and suits up. He makes it back to the Colosso fighting floor, and learns he is to fight Urshan, a Maescolos of Jad and Prince Philip's personal gladiator. Trumpets sound, and the duel commences. Hadrian hurls a spear at the swordmaster, who simply catches it. They clash with swords, but it soon becomes apparent that Urshan's skill far surpasses Hadrian's. However, Hadrian digs deep and manages to hold his ground, even disarming Urshan. But the swordmaster simply continues the fight with his bare hands, at one point even slapping Hadrian's blade away. Hadrian is disarmed, and Urshan commands him to yield, but Hadrian rises and they spring into a blur of action again. A more serious look comes over Urshan's face, and Hadrian realizes the Empress has likely sent the Jadian to kill him. He is disarmed again and forced to his knees at the mercy of Urshan. However, he then pulls out a parrying dagger from his boot and stabs Urshan in the foot. They grapple for Hadrian's fallen sword, but then somehow Urshan pulls out a high matter sword, a weapon forbidden in the Colosso. He swings, and Hadrian instinctively raises his left hand to stop the killing blow, but his prosthetic adamant arm bones block it, with blood dripping down from severed skin and veins. The crowd is stunned, cries of half-mortal echoing across the arena. Urshan swings again, and Hadrian catches the blade in his hand. He picks up a shattered ceramic sword and stabs Urshan in the neck. Hadrian tries to question the assassin, but Urshan then activates a poison, and he literally melts away in a vile mix of red and yellow liquids. It is a terrifying poison, and is also a chemical signature of the Chantry called dysphalide. A shaken Hadrian staggers away from the Colosso and makes it back to his shuttle. He then senses something is wrong, for Syrian is missing and he has not been stopped by any guards. He then notices the pilot is dead and turns to flee. The shuttle explodes and he is thrown into the air and loses consciousness. Weeks later, Hadrian finally awakens to learn that Syrian wasn't on the shuttle and had run to the Colosso at the first sounds of chaos. It also turns out Brethnak has not been executed, but instead shipped off-world to live in relatively comfortable exile. Hadrian is furious, for none of the conspirators against him will apparently be punished or brought to light. He is eventually summoned for another audience with the Emperor. William is frustrated, for it is clearly obvious the Chantry wants Hadrian dead. Yet he cannot challenge them or continue to defend Hadrian at the risk of igniting political infighting that will bring down the Empire. William then asks Hadrian openly why it wants access to the Imperial Library on Colchis. Left with no further wiggle room, Hadrian confesses at last he knows of the Quiet. William seems unsurprised to hear of Hadrian's visions as everything is revealed about Hadrian's theories on the Quiet. Hadrian admits that he believes in truth, he serves the Quiet and their mysterious agenda. He vehemently denies wanting the throne, asserting he is of more use to the Emperor on the front away from Forum. William takes it all in stride, and then gives Hadrian his gold ring of Sir George, one that will grant him access to the Colchis library. Hadrian is to report directly to him via telegraph, and Alexander is allowed to accompany him. The Tamerlane is ready to depart, and Hadrian enacts one final command. He orders Krim to arrange for Augustine Bourbon's assassination, to take place some years later after they leave Forum. Krim makes the necessary arrangements. In some 3 years after the Tamerlane leaves Forum, Bourbon is killed in a mysterious shuttle bombing. Presently, Red Company arrives at Colchis, a grey, rainy world. Hadrian travels through the library and is permitted to enter, accompanied by Volga and his friends. The master of Nov Belgarathanium, Primate Arian, is surprised when Hadrian asks for texts on the Mericani and believes it to be a fool's errand. He reveals the only relevant works are sealed away in Gabriel's archive, which cannot be opened. Hadrian is thus forced to wire Emperor William to gain special permission, and to pass the time he and Volga explore the main library. In the meantime, Hadrian's thousands of soldiers are decanted from Fugue and sent to the warmer Severast Islands for a vacation. Hadrian is summoned to meet with an archivist, and is led by a woman named Carina to some out-of-the-way quarters. Vast is the galaxy, and vaster still the cosmos, but vaster, greater, even than that is the cosmos, the great enemy of chaos, the order that stands above it all. 400 billion suns in our galaxy, trillions of worlds, 500 million settled by man. So small, small enough for chance, for miracles unlooked for. "Hello, Hadrian," said Tor Gibson. Tears streaming down his face, Hadrian falls to his knees. It has been 450 standard years since he last saw Gibson, and Hadrian tells him everything that happened to him, even his time with Kat on Borisevo and everything on Amesh. He also learns he has a younger sister who is favored to inherit Delos. Later, he introduces Volga to Gibson. After a month of waiting, the paperwork is finally cleared to grant him access to Gabriel's archive. Tor Arian guides them below sea level, where the archive is protected with atomics in the event, Arian warns, if anything should escape. An uneasy nervousness runs through the group, not knowing what they will find inside. At last the doors are opened, and inside are many artifacts of the Mericani, including portraits of that people's past lords. Last of them all was Julian Felsenburg, who Gibson explains was a businessman who introduced machines to his people under the promise of ending injustice. When he died, he turned the government not over to a successor, but to his machines, one of which was called Columbia. Hadrian and the others spend days in the archives, with Valka scanning countless works using her neural lace. Days become months. After 5 years, Hadrian and his officers travel to Thessa to join the soldiers on leave. For a year, they stay on the islands, and for a time, they are truly happy. It was good to see my people, my friends, so happy. They deserved it. They deserved peace, deserved more than I can give. Eventually, Hadrian and Valka return to the vaults, determined to find what Emperor Gabriel had deemed so dangerous as to warrant being sealed away for thousands of years. They cannot discern why the machines of the Americani had turned against their masters. Yet they do know now that Columbia was the daughter of Felsenburgh, his computer god. Columbia had 52 daughters, who established colonies across the stars, new cities marked by Americani pyramids. And there was truly great advancement in that time. Mankind freed from hunger and disease, a perfect order achieved. But over time, man became akin to sheep for the shepherd of the Americani. The computers gained control over man's reproduction and rearing of children, and soon men became blissfully entrapped in a life of virtual dream, and they were brought inside the pyramids, never to come out again. More years passed for Hadrian and Valka, with Prince Alexander continuing his studies, this time under the eye of Tor Gibson. The Scholias also deems it a real possibility that Alexander may be being groomed to inherit the solar throne itself upon William's passing. Valka then discovers a hidden blast pit, which she believes may contain a Americani ship. They find another vault door, where inside there lies the ship USS Horizon. Hadrian and the others investigate the ancient machine, and suddenly a voice similar to Brethren's echoes across the hold. It is another AI of sorts, but seems to be confused from its long imprisonment. I am Horizon, daughter of Columbia, mother to millions unborn. Horizon reveals it was designed to establish a colony called Orlando, and repeatedly asked to see Gabriel. Hadrian and Valka talk more with it, knowing the ancient Americani had used organic neural tissue to speed up their processing powers. This was the degradation of man at the hands of the daemons they built, for eventually they became mere components for greater machines. Horizon reveals the computers have been able to stop mankind from dying by inducing cancer, causing many to suffer unnatural growths. Their limbs were deemed unnecessary and were pruned, even their organs and bones, for it was only the brains that the Americani required. This was what the first God Emperor fought to save humanity from, and give back to it a human universe and human death. Hadrian then asks Horizon of the quiet, and interference. Time is an illusion, an artifact of human consciousness, a way of perceiving the higher dimensions of physical reality that your minds cannot comprehend. Time is only another kind of space through which things move. Your kind moves forward only toward what you call the future. There are other kinds, kinds that move backward, kinds that move sideways, kinds that do not move at all. We are made in your image and can move with you, but can see farther. The interference cannot move, but speaks across time, directing the flow to its own end. The quiet, the interference, opposed the Americani long ago, and Horizon shows them a vast map of many systems containing quiet ruins. Valka is confused, for she has been to several of these worlds but found nothing. They were not ruins in the future. Hadrian realizes the sites are somehow running back in time, and have not fully come to exist yet. He asks Horizon where it has heard the quiet from the most often, and a single, unremarkable system is shown. Having gotten all they could out of the dying machine, the party leaves the archives and reseals its secrets. Hadrian and Valka bid farewell to Gibson and return to the main city of Aya. There, Syrian approaches Hadrian and tells him she wishes to stay on Thessa and leave Red Company. Though upset he is losing one of his close friends, Hadrian releases her from his service. The Tamerlane departs Colchis after staying on the planet for 13 years, and begins the search for the world highlighted by Horizon. They reach the coordinates after traveling at warp for 50 years, finding no signs of life on the desolate landscape void of air. Hadrian joins the squads of shuttles sent out to survey the surface. On one of the flights, he dozes off and dreams. Hadrian sees himself in chains, led in front of a great host of Cielsen by Syriani Dorayaica. Ruins are then found, massive stone arches near a mountainside where a door can be spotted. Camp is set up near the ruins, and Hadrian and Valka eagerly begin their studies. They enter the door with Krim, finding a massive complex that dwarfs the ruins at Kalag. Hadrian slices a chip of the signature blackstone off from a wall, but it abruptly vanishes. The cut in the wall also disappears, more evidence of the Quiet's peculiar relationship with time. They come to a round chamber that almost seems to resemble a massive city. Exploration of the vast complex continues for months, with Valka naming it Anika. Hadrian climbs to the top of the mountain, finding it eerily quiet, almost a seat for gods. He then feels a wind, one not sensed at all by a soldier escort. 3 years pass on Anika, with research continuing. However, news soon reaches Red Company from director Friedrich Oberlin. The Cielsen have scored a devastating victory at Marinus and taken the Vale. It means the Empire will soon lose control over the Norman expanse, and Red Company has been summoned to rejoin the fleet at Berenice. Preparations are already underway to retake Marinus, with the launch date set some 80 years in the future. Photos are shown showing a black banner with a white hand, signaling the presence of the Ieter Yamani. Hadrian, however, deems their work at Anika too important and believes they must stay. Alexander is defiant, refusing to trust Hadrian's judgment. He has even shown footage of Aranata killing Hadrian, but believes it to be witchcraft and storms away. But over 5 years, agonizingly little progress is made. Time is running short for any discovery to be made, at the risk of further ire from the crew. However, one day Hadrian is mapping a chamber with Valka when she suddenly goes quiet. Hadrian looks around, and finds the hall he is in is somehow straightened into infinity, with Valka nowhere to be seen. He follows the hall for what seems like forever, until at last he sees a distant light. It turns out to be a narrow bridge that incomprehensibly leaves the mountain and stretches across the plains below. Hadrian's comms are still silent, and he turns to see the path behind him sealed off. There is also no sign of the camp below, and the mountain itself has changed. Now there are high terraces, and even giant faces that stare at Hadrian as he crosses the bridge. He finds it spans towards a new mountain, even higher than the one he had been exploring with Valka. Not knowing fully what inspired him to do so, Hadrian climbs to its summit, time meaningless. He recalls the words of brethren so long ago. Seek them at the highest place, at the bottom of the world. Hadrian's strength fails him, and he collapses, exhausted. He falls asleep, but awakens later to the sound of a breeze. And on the mountaintop he sees in front of him a single white flower, as Hadrian seems to be whispered in the wind. Hadrian somehow rises to his feet. I can hear you, I told the Quiet, and spread my arms. Here I am. And the Quiet respond, telling Hadrian to take off the mask of his envirosuit. Though there is no air in Anika, he complies. Instantly Hadrian struggles to breathe, and he stumbles and falls. He stops falling then, finding breath suddenly once more. Where the flower was, there is now a massive stone obelisk, with a glyph of the Quiet on it. The voices of the Quiet tell him he is somehow behind the stage. Hadrian approaches it and stares at its reflection. He begins to turn away, but the reflection does not move, and he sees green eyes staring back at him. The reflection tells him, "You are the shortest way," and presses its hand on the stone. Hadrian mirrors it, and cold pain suddenly shoots through his body. Somehow his vision instantly turns into a bird's eye view of the mountain. Flashes of vision shoot across, other mountaintops with other Hadrians, kneeling, standing, or simply not there. He also sees his camp in distant mountains with no monolith of stone at all, and suddenly realizes. The breath of time unrolled beneath me, all the places that might have been, or might be, breaking like waves against the ever-moving present. Hadrian is seeing infinite possibilities of the present moment that could have happened, and knows that this current moment that he is experiencing is the only one that is real. He watches in a state of revelation as the other possibilities of the present shatter before him, flowing towards the future. Focusing, I found I could pick out the threads, the rivers of time tangled in that ocean. Hadrian sees the past thread of the history of humanity, including the fall of the Americani and the burning of the ancient empires of man. And he sees his own past, stretching from Delos all the way to now. It is fractured where the quiet have forced him to enmesh, and where Arenata killed him, hearkening back to the words of Jari the Oracle, broken and broken again. Hadrian then looks into the future and sees the Cielsen raging across the galaxy. He sees the eternal beauty of Forum fall into flame, the red-haired royals of House Avent gruesomely hanging on hooks. He even sees a woman with black hair on Devil's Rest, gazing at black ships descending from the sky. But he is then pulled forwards to a vision of the Demiurge. There on the bridge, a holograph is shown of two fleets converging over a green world with a yellow star, forces of incomprehensible numbers, well into the millions. Hadrian then sees himself stride forwards, speaking to a voice he does not recognize. Hadrian watches himself give the order to fire at will, and is horrified as the sun explodes, consuming the planet and both fleets entirely. He screams and is thrown out of the vision, terrified at what he saw. Why? I lay back against the ground, and when I spoke it was in a smaller, weaker voice than before. In Earth's name, why? We must be. Hadrian refuses to become the Quiet's tool to fulfill this prophetic vision, but only the same haunting words are uttered back at him. What must be? This must be. He tries to stumble down the mountain, but falls and is knocked out. In another dream, or perhaps not, the Quiet reappear to him in the forms of Gen, Switch, and Cat. They tell him the vision is inevitable, and urge Hadrian to listen before vanishing. And then Hadrian taps into his power of vision, again seeing possibilities streaming out before him. His water and food gone, he sees variations of his death on the mountain, but one where he lives. To my right, I saw myself stand, and saw the path towards standing, dependent on factors so small and improbable they would almost certainly never occur at all. The faint flicker of chemical energy in my body, the constitution of will, the breaths taken just deeply enough to find the air I needed. I had only to choose the path. I chose. I stood, and my vision of choice blended with the reality. To create is to choose. Hadrian has gained the power to see and choose between the infinite possibilities of nows, and now finds himself in the same cathedral from his visions on Fergassos and Calag. The familiar bassinet is there, and inside is a pure white egg. It is the cradle of the Quiet, and suddenly the cathedral doors open. He is thrown forwards on a silver line until he reaches the destroyed sun, and turns to see other lines, winding or broken, but all longer than his own silver ones stemming from the cradle. You are the shortest way. Hadrian has been chosen to create the Quiet, and for this to happen the Cielsen must be destroyed. He is confused, for to his best knowledge, the Cielsen also seem to worship the Quiet. A resounding no is heard, and his vision changes again. Before him he now sees the entire dominion of humanity, yet incredibly small in the vastness of the galaxy. And he sees man's extinction play out in countless ways, at the hands of the Americani, destroyed by the Cielsen, or gone in the days of ancient Earth. And in even farther off stars and systems, other empires lurked in distant galaxies. And I beheld darker things, older things, greater ones. Beings vast and incomprehensible as mountains moved beneath the outer suns, their antique wills slow and slouching as they bent their power on the stars. I saw hideous peoples on their knees in worship, and I knew it was not the Quiet the Cielsen praised. Hadrian can only see glimpses of those monstrous beings, impossible to see or understand. They have not even deigned to regard humanity as relevant, consequential. Instead, the Cielsen, their servants, had done so. The Quiet ambiguously revealed that other beings had come before, and the vision flashes back to the egg in the cradle. Hadrian realizes he has become embroiled in a war of sorts, between the Quiet and the unfathomable Watchers of the Cielsen, for two futures branch out from the egg, where the Quiet are either born or simply not. Down one passage there was only darkness, such a darkness as had been before creation, the darkness of a universe dead and cold, where all energy was lost. There the Watchers ruled in eternal might and plotted their conquest in every corner of time, until everything that ever was or might have been was lost. Down the other, the egg hatched, and beyond its birth I saw the stars reborn, a new universe, a new kingdom, a second life. The Cielsen were only another battle in the long war, the only war, not life against life, man against Cenobite, and certainly not the petty wars of man against man. Theirs was the final war, light against darkness, good and evil, heaven and hell. Hadrian has been chosen to represent the quiet, to let the Watchers know the quiet are not abstract foes in this eternal conflict. Yet another vision is shown, one of Hadrian being chained at Dorayaica's feet, before a host of 100 Cielsen princes. A massive world ship blocks out the sun of the planet, which he knows is called Actorumnu from his time long ago with the Baton Tanaran. He sees a mass of humans, Red Company below him, and Dorayaica claps its hands. The vision disperses, and Hadrian then pleads for the quiet to release him so he can take his men to Berenice and the fleet. They warn him that if he does so, he will go beyond their sight, for it is in that now that suddenly the quiet's future becomes impossible. It will be up to Hadrian to guide it back to the correct path. The quiet appear to Hadrian as Emperor William, and ask him a simple question. Do you swear to see to its end any course begun? I will, I said, rejecting prophecy and fate. Then go. Hadrian looks back at the circular glyphs on the black stone before him, the symbols that he and Valka have been unable to translate for decades. He realizes they are not a language, but a mechanism that connects the quiet's tunnels across the realms of time and possibility with Hadrian's simple world. The glyphs begin to move, and Hadrian's hand falls through. A staircase leading down is revealed as the glyphs build him a corridor back to his world, no longer behind the scenes of time. He sees a glow light, and knows he has at last returned to his army and camp. Hadrian barely manages to make it back within sight of the sentries, using his powers to find the path where he stays alive until he is spotted. Valka, Polino, and Krim race out to get him, and he passes out. He awakens next to Valka and tells her he saw the quiet. It turns out he had been gone for 40 days. Hadrian takes a cane and walks to the bridge, informing his army they are to travel to Berenice. It is imperative they stop Dorayaica there, which Hadrian hopes will save the quiet and prevent his last apocalyptic vision of Red Company from happening. Durand is skeptical, citing that this decision now, of all times, seems to be incredibly late. Hadrian takes Durand's blaster and holds it to his chest. He forces Durand to fire as Valka screams, but Hadrian emerges unharmed, nary a wound. There were any number of alternative spaces where Durand never fired, any number of Hadrians who were never shot. My consciousness spread with my vision across those infinite parallels, and I had traded one for another even as the bullet ripped through me. It takes a tremendous exertion of will, but sends a profound message to Hadrian's officers. Durand is stunned, and the legend of the half-mortal grows. Consciousness, I think, is a mechanism we humans have evolved for sorting the threads of time. We do it blindly, and that is enough for most of us, most of the time. I am no different, save that I have learned to listen. The Tamerlane makes haste to Berenice and settles in Deira for 2 years. Berenice itself is a mining colony with deep chasms stretching up to 5 miles below the surface, with the city of Deira sheltered behind the Titanic storm wall. There, Hadrian is reunited with 1st Strategos Titus Hauptmann as the two commanders brace for the attack of Syriani Dorayaica. Besander Lin is also there, as Hadrian believes they will also be attacked by the Cielsen fleet that destroyed Marinus. They have been maneuvered into place by Dorayaica flawlessly, but Hauptmann is skeptical. Lin supports Hadrian's prognostications, which only he knows are actually the fruit of his visions. However, more intel comes in corroborating Hadrian's suspicions, and Hauptmann decides to pull the bulk of his fleet out of the system, planning to turn the tables on the Cielsen attack. The defense of Berenice is planned, with Hadrian to serve with the 437th Legion alongside Sir Leonid Bartos and Besander Lin. It will be imperative to hold the storm wall, for underneath it are the bunkers where the people of Deira will be sheltered. Over the next few weeks, Hadrian assists with preparing the defenses and monitoring the evacuations. Several colossi, massive 100-foot-tall mechanical beasts, are lined outside the storm wall in front of the airfield where the Cielcen assault is expected to fall. Red Company and the Urchtani auxiliaries are sent to the city, where Hauptmann believes the Cielcen will send their berserkers in the first attack. Octavia will help Hauptmann's fleet in the sky. Lorien proposes they draw the Cielcen into the abandoned city and station their men at the approach tunnels to the bunkers. When the Cielcen arrive, they will open fire on the city and ambush the invaders. The eve before the battle, Valka gives Hadrian her phylactery, a sample of her blood. It is a powerful gesture, and creates a possibility where they may be able to have a child together. Thunder rolls across Berenice the following day, as Red Company waits in the city for the Cielcen and Dorayaica to fall upon them. As Hadrian stands with his soldiers, a legionnaire approaches him. "The men say you are the chosen, the son of Earth come again. They say you will reveal yourself in battle here and drive the scourge back into the dark." Speaking loudly so many can hear, Hadrian asserts he does not want the throne, merely peace. Then, reports come in of 22 Cielcen ships engaging the fleet above. Black siege towers are dropped out of the sky, and Hadrian orders everyone into the tunnel as the shelling begins. Fire rips across the sky as the Cielcen horde makes landfall, and black towers emerge from the burning city. Lorien unleashes his artillery on the towers, but thousands of Nahute are unleashed and weave an impenetrable shield around the monoliths. It is another new, innovative tactic of Dorayaica, and Deira becomes a hellscape. Cielcen emerge from dozens of siege towers alongside countless Nahute as sirens begin to wail across the ruins. A squad of Cielcen appears before Hadrian and Paulino, wearing black armor with the white hand of Dorayaica. They are all destroyed as battle breaks out in full. A small group of legionnaires barely makes it to Hadrian's men, informing him the Cielcen chimeras have been spotted. Paulino sends 2 decades to investigate as more Cielcen ships continue to drop in. The raid sirens stop, indicating the city has temporarily lost power. The sound of fighting can now be heard, but Hadrian then hears a cold, terrible scream emanate from somewhere in the city. The Cielcen begin to climb the inner wall where the Urchtani and anti-aircraft artillery are stationed, and Hadrian rushes to reinforce them. There, he sees 36 exalted Cielcen climbing the walls, terrifying weapons slowly ascending towards the missile batteries. Hadrian and his men rush towards the stairs leading up, but freeze when a massive white hand emerges from the smoke. It is the size of a grown man, and then a Viadan of Dorayaica appears. The mechanical behemoth is 30 feet tall, and lets out a ghastly roar. Hadrian and his men flee frantically up the stairs as the beast closes in on the inner wall. One of the smaller exalted destroys the decades and scatters them, and Hadrian desperately hails Udax. The Urchtani arrive just in time to carry the surviving legionnaires up and away to the top of the inner wall. The Chimera, one of Dorayaica's 6 most powerful servants, presents a new wrinkle in the battle. Hadrian shifts the focus of the artillery to the Cielcen hybrids, but they soon scale the wall. One charges Hadrian, wielding a massive blade. Hadrian taps into his powers again and finds the perfect strike to cut it in half with a single blow. However, the Cielcen fleet now arrives, and the Viadan appears. The skies turn white above Deira, and Leonid Bartos patches in. Hauptmann had grouped his fleet too close together, and many of his ships have been destroyed. There is no word from Octavia Corvo and the Tamerlane. Chaos reigns in the city, the defenders rapidly losing ground. The fleet above has withdrawn, meaning they will have to hold out on the surface for 3 days until a counterattack can be mustered. Hauptmann is presumed dead, and worst of all, Dorayaica and the main Cielcen world ship have not been spotted yet. Bartos loses hope, ordering Hadrian to abandon the wall. He quits the field, and Lorien Aristides assumes command. Then, the Viadan rumbles in front of Hadrian, its head looming out of the smoke the size of a passenger shuttle. Its name is Bahude, and it declares a Cielcen victory to be inevitable. Hadrian draws his sword and charges just as Lorien sends a craft in to open fire on the behemoth. It reels, and Valka and Paulino grab Hadrian and pull him back. Orders ring out from Lorien for all the soldiers to fall back into the tunnels. Hadrian and the other survivors must run half a mile back to relative safety. He defends the rear of the retreating soldiers as they make it back to the tunnels, triggering explosions to seal the entrance as they go. Hadrian confronts a despairing Bartos and puts him in fugue, disgusted by his cowardice. He then meets with Lorien, learning the tunnel defenses are holding for the time being. However, the Cialsans seem to be holding back, as if waiting for something. Their scale of numbers is daunting, to say the least. There are only 80,000 men to Hadrian's defense force, with presumably millions of Cialsan above. Left with precious little options, Hadrian and the commanders decide to bomb the city. Bombs begin to fall, but this time from the defenders rather than the Cialsan. And when the dust settled and the smoke was washed away by the wind, Deira was in ruins, a slag heap of blessed stone and twisted iron snarling from the Valley of the Diver like so many rotten teeth. The shattered siege tower smoldered amidst that ruin, and nothing moved. A storm comes over the land, pausing the fighting for a brief time. Alexander again confronts Hadrian, believing his legend to be fraudulent. He reveals that Empress Maria had warned him Hadrian may be power-hungry. Fearful, and combined with the stress of battle, Alexander slaps Hadrian, commanding him to kneel. He draws back his arm again, and Hadrian chooses a path. He uses his power to angle his cheek precisely so Alexander breaks his finger on the strike, then coldly glares up at him. The prince departs, but is a problem that must be dealt with after the battle. Berenice begins to flood after the storm passes, and on the landing field in front of the storm wall, the Cialsan ships still have not moved. Then, a single Cialsan in ceremonial white is spotted striding forwards, the herald of Dorayaica. The infinite Cialsan host lets loose terrible screams at the defenders of the city, and from the dozens of siege towers dark blue banners are unfurled with the white hand of Dorayaica. Vel nun, vel nun, vel nun. What are they saying? Aristides asked, half rising from his seat. In a dry voice, I answered him. He comes. Then, the sun of Berenice goes out. Hadrian grows cold, knowing Dorayaica's world ship has at last arrived. A moon had appeared in Berenice's sky, and the sudden shock of its presence had shaken the shallow seas and set the whole world to shuddering. It is the biggest Cialsan ship ever seen in the war. A looming fortress of iron Hadrian knows goes by one name, Darantun. Hopelessness begins to run through the ranks of men and the officers, but then humanity's eyes turn to Hadrian half-mortal. He and Paulino rally the troops, revealing the tales of Hadrian's death are true. I will die again if I must. And hope springs again at the troops as the shields begin to take fire. A red streak falls from the sky and is revealed to be a massive ram 100 feet high with a rod of terrible iron. Two more crash down beside it, Dorayaica's gambit to break the storm wall. One of the rams then begins to hammer the ground below it, and breaches the earth above Terminal G just before exploding. Hadrian races away to save the refugees in the terminal, where Captain Basanderlin has begun rescue efforts. They must escort them back to the main fortress, which is already dangerously overcrowded. Several brave legionnaires volunteer to lead the civilians away, but the winding, interconnected tunnels suddenly begin to buzz with Nahute. The Cialsan warriors will not be far behind, as above Lorien sends the great Colossi against the wave of Cialsan before the storm wall. A desperate fight breaks out below Berenice, Hadrian leading the charge against the Cialsan as he coordinates efforts to seal the breach above. Thousands of civilians press past them still, fleeing for the main fortress. The ceiling above them breaks, and another breach opens up when a colossus accidentally falls through. Hadrian knows that the last civilians are now in mortal danger, and orders Basander to join his defense. There will not be enough room for all the refugees, but to buy time, Hadrian decides to take Volga through a side tunnel, hoping to find a way under the main Cialsan army. Lorien is forced to withdraw the Colossi back to the wall, but the landing field has become a brutal kill zone for the Cialsan, who cannot penetrate the guns. Hadrian leads Volga, Basander, and 50 men down a tunnel highlighted by Lorien and finds the cargo ship Kupari. They pillage its explosive power cells, and Hadrian cautiously finds a way to the surface and peers over the edge of a massive crater. He is able to see the raging battle in front of the storm wall, with the massive colossi standing at ease and the Syelson host led by the Vayadan Behude. Another massive siege tower drops down, and Hadrian returns below to help load the cells onto a landing platform. Paulino informs them they will not be able to hold the terminal for much longer. Hadrian's team is ambushed by more Syelson and Nahute, but so terrifying is the wrath of the half-mortal that the enemy flees. It then turns out there is no tram, meaning the explosives will have to be carried by hand. Word reaches them the Syelson have begun to pull back deeper into the other terminals, meaning their tunnel may soon be overrun. The defenders everywhere are put on the back foot, and the Syelson breach the side tunnels and begin harrying the refugees. Hadrian and Besander detonate the explosives, and 2 siege towers on the surface are destroyed. It creates a chain reaction and a massive firestorm that kills thousands of Syelson and destroys a third of their landing craft. Hadrian and Besander then fight their way back to Paulino, who is close to being overrun. Left with no other option, they are forced to climb up to the surface to regroup and fall back to the wall. There is nowhere for Hadrian's refugees to go, and Lorien cannot open the tunnel leading to the main hypogeum without risking a deadly stampede. Then, a strange drumming booms in the air, and the swarms of Nahute over the field suddenly swarm forwards. The Syelson begin chanting Teki, Teki, as Hadrian's men flee across the field. The Syelson army surges forwards also as the defenders' gunfire rips them apart. Hadrian looks over at the most recently landed siege tower, and notes it is shielded. The landscape glows red, and then a massive targeting laser guides a blinding blast fired from the world ship at the defending Imperial ships, searing them clean out of the sky. The siege tower then unleashes several pistons, and begins advancing to the storm wall to act as a battering ram. Knowing they must stop it, Hadrian orders the Erchthani to fly them towards the crawler, narrowly managing to avoid another blast from the orbital laser. Hadrian drops from his flyer some 100 feet above it, using his powers to find a possibility where he survives the landing. More legionnaires and Erchthani join him to fight the Syelson on board. Udax, Valka, Besander, and the Erchthani leader Barda all arrive at his side as Hadrian searches for a way inside. The crawler is getting closer to the storm wall by the moment, and the orbital laser begins to train its fire on the colossi. Hadrian and Besander manage to break inside, but find the crawler only lightly defended. They discover a massive drill and then encounter a hairless man. Hadrian immediately realizes he belongs to Minos, the extrasolarian company allied with the Syelson. He is called Urbane, and Behude also appears. Hadrian shouts out for Udax, who darts down and decapitates Urbane immediately. The others flee to higher ground to get away from the Vayadan. But Behude tears away the catwalks and grabs Hadrian in a powerful grip. He is nearly crushed, but then Besanderlin leaps forward and cuts off Behude's arm. Valka uses her neural lace to free Hadrian, but then suddenly screams. Urbane's voice rings out from his body, which is revealed to be an SOM. He has attacked Valka's mind, and she is now in the fight of her life. Hadrian destroys the severed head speaking to him from the ground, and Valka's screaming stops. Valka herself, however, is badly weakened. The crawler then stops, and Hadrian realizes that Barda and the other Erchthani have succeeded in destroying one of its treads. Valka senses something in her head and seems to be fighting for control of her very body, the result of a virus unleashed by Urbane. Behude, though heavily damaged, is still killing Hadrian and Besander's men. Valka then reveals she has managed to learn Behude will overload its power cells at the wall, sacrificing itself to create a breach. The battle with the giant rages on, with the squad still taking heavy casualties. Lin charges Behude and attaches a grenade to its leg, but is hit and sent flying away. Behude turns to Hadrian and brings a monstrous fist down towards him. Hadrian raises his left arm and absorbs the blow without flinching. He is inexplicably unharmed, and Udax then dives and stabs Behude in its last good eye. But Behude reaches up and grabs Udax, crushing the Erchthani to a pulp. The Vayadan, in a blind rage, then rambles towards the storm wall. Valka then exclaims in triumph, and the Vayadan suddenly falls. Its chest cavity opens, revealing a brain and a few organs deemed necessary for survival. Hadrian approaches the husk, and asks why Behude is so certain Dorayaica will be their doom. With its dying words, Behude ominously replies, "So that he can become like them." With the death of Behude, The Syelson army loses cohesion, even turning on each other. Yet Darantun still looms above, and the Imperial fleet remains a day away from providing any sort of help. Despite the victory, Hadrian knows Dorayaica still holds all the cards, especially the orbital laser. Valka's condition remains a mystery, and she still doesn't fully know what Urbane has done to her. Hadrian has her put under fugue until the battle concludes. A brilliant white light then shines across the battlefield, and Hadrian and his men pull back to the storm wall. A giant holograph then appears, the Prince of Princes and Prophet of the Syelson, anointed of the Watchers who dream beneath the stars. Eta ba Etain and Shiomu, the Scourge of Earth, Syriani Dorayaica. It commands Hadrian to surrender, and Hadrian is given a comm so he can communicate with Dorayaica. It calls him a kinsman Eta ba Yukajim, or King of the Vermin. Hadrian must surrender himself to the personal custody of Dorayaica in exchange for his men on the field being permitted to return safely. He agrees to the terms, and is told to come out on the field the following morning. His officers naturally disagree with the decision, but Hadrian's mind cannot be changed. Paulino ends up escorting him before the wall, and the doors open. Hadrian walks out, approaching the giant projection of Dorayaica. At the last moment, he orders the guards to stop Paulino from following him, who requires 9 men to restrain him. However, Dorayaica then reveals it plans to kill Hadrian in front of his men, to send a message that he is indeed mortal. It commands the orbital laser to fire again, but Hadrian channels his prescience, his second sight, and as around him the earth is sundered and boiled, he emerges unscathed. In front of Dorayaica, in front of millions of Syelson and all his men looking on. Dorayaica is horrified, its victory vanishing into smoke before its eyes. Again the laser fires, but again Hadrian simply walks through it. The holograph vanishes, and then above him the world ship moves away from the sun. For the remnants of the fleet, and Octavia, Corvo, and the Tamerlane have arrived at last, and humanity has victory. Hadrian returns to the storm wall, word spreading like wildfire of his display on the field. The soldiers again ask him if he is the chosen, the son of Earth and God Emperor reborn. My answer did not matter. Every last one of them had seen, witnessed the confrontation on the plain. No answer of mine could make a difference. I had lost control of my dream. I was chosen because they believed me to be, whatever the truth may be. And Hadrian then sees in the throng Prince Alexander. Their gazes lock, the prince is one filled with suspicion. Hadrian simply hangs his head as cries ring out. The Son of Earth, the Son of Earth, the Son of Earth has come.